Yes, welcome to everybody. My name's Stephanie Griffiths, but I'm known as Stevie. And as Gary said, I'm acting head of counselling. And I've been here some considerable time. And over the years that I've been here, I've seen the counselling / psychological service grow enormously. Now, of course, the reason for that is we've had to respond, A, to the increasing number of students coming through to King's College, and B, to the greater increase in mental health issues. Now, what I'm going to do in this presentation today is go some way to explaining why there seem to be a larger number of identified mental health problems, and also give you a backdrop to what's happening in this country. And then I'm going on specifically to mention how we as a service operate within Gary's directorate of the student experience. I hope you realise, as you've listened to everybody talk today and will tomorrow, that we do very much link up. We communicate very well. I mean, I have to compliment Gary here. He has been in this job just over a year now, and he's done a fantastic job in bringing everybody together, so we're all communicating much better. So, I mean, full marks to him there. And I hope we'll go forward to really, really improve the student experience at King's College. Now, the PowerPoint presentation I have is quite dense, and there's a reason for this, because I want you to have, when you go away with the presentation, to have lots of facts and figures. I'm not going to bore you by repeating a lot of them. They're going to be there for you, but I will highlight significant ones as they come out. Now, first of all, since the 1960s, there's been a massive shift in the way higher education and universities have to respond to the population. Now, significantly, in 1995, the Disability Discrimination Act was introduced, so that all institutions now have a duty of care to respond to mental health problems. So we have to make adjustments in our study environment to accommodate those. Now, they go from making sure everybody has a disability in terms of motor abilities, has access, that there's adequate supervision for students who have hearing difficulties or sight difficulties. But significantly, as far as we're concerned, our department, it has to do with psychological problems. Now, as Stuart asked you about tutoring, can I ask you who has a psychological service in your institution? So, okay, a small, probably a third. Now, going on, in 2001, we had a Special Education Needs and Discrimination Act, which really followed on from the Disability Discrimination Act in '95. In 1997, and this is of great significance, there was an inquiry that introduced the concept of widening participation. Now, this has given students who would not normally have had the opportunity to come to university the chance to do so. And of course, the knock-on effect is that we have a lot of students whose families really don't have the understanding of what higher education is all about. So whereas it's very exciting and obviously, you know, there's a lot of kudos attached to these young people coming to university, they don't always have the same support because the parents don't have that understanding. So we have to really help those students bridge between the environment they've been in and the school they've been in and the university. Now, King's has been in the forefront of introducing an access to medicine course. Now, what they've done is pilot a scheme in South London schools where students who haven't reached the grade in terms of A-levels are given the opportunity to come and study medicine. And it's been a very successful course. It means that they are given an extra year and then they're put into the first year with the rest of the first year students studying medicine. But they, of course, have a unique set of difficulties, but I think, you know, we'll all agree that it's a wonderful, wonderful scheme. We've also got an enhanced support dentistry programme and a K+ scheme, which I don't know a lot about, maybe Gary does.
We had a presentation.
You did, great. So you probably know quite a lot about all this. Okay, so as you'll understand, there's a shift in the demographics of the students coming through. Right, so we'll whiz through that. So we've accepted there's a large number, perhaps, of students who wouldn't otherwise have been here. We have students who are taking gap years, which I'm sure you know, having a year out between school and university. Those figures were a bit muddied recently because of the fee hike, because a lot of students who would normally have taken a gap year couldn't take a gap year because they wanted to get in before the £9,000 fee increase happened. So the last year's cohort actually represented a few who should not have come to university when they did, so they had unique difficulties. Now, looking at the international student breakdown, there has been an increase of 6% from 2009 to 10, but I think significantly looking down, it's our numbers we need to talk about. You will see that in 2010 to 11, Gary may have more recent figures, I couldn't access them, we have 24% of the student population, international students. Now, we can all think of good reasons why they're coming to King's, but we do hope to maintain that number and indeed increase it, because we do welcome the diversity of international students. Now, you'll see of the top non-EU sending countries, China completely tops it. Now, we're very interested in the kind of students, of the backgrounds of the students coming here. And within our psychological services, we try to take special note of those backgrounds. For example, we're aware that in China, with the one-child policy, a lot of students who come here will have a lot of pressure on them, both internal and external, to succeed, because they may have been sent by their governments or sponsored, but they're also that one child within that family. So it's very sort of special that they've come. Now, we had a recent case where a Chinese student was accused, actually incorrectly perhaps, of plagiarism, but it was an issue. Now, once we were aware of that, we had to act quickly to make sure that Chinese student felt supported, because our concern was that she would feel very isolated and may in fact be at risk because of all the shame attached to her being accused of something. So you can see how we have to really think about those backgrounds and be, quite kind of up to speed in terms of what's happening. We do have more and more American students coming through. Are there any Americans in here before I say anything? Not today, because they are very used to having psychological problems. And what we're finding is they come in with their labels, because they do label psychiatric difficulties in the States more than here. And they'll come in and say, this is what I've got, with a long list, and we have to respond very much to what they're coming through with. But I don't mean to belittle them, because they're actually a charming group of students. But you can see how we have to go from one extreme where there's a Chinese student who will be very, find it very difficult to communicate their problem, to an American who will be out there with it. Now, the top EU sending countries are their Republic of Ireland, Germany quite high up, right down to Bulgaria. I did notice when I was looking through the delegate list that your countries are at the moment quite underrepresented, so I do hope after this experience you can spread the word and more of your students will come to the UK. So I think I've covered this slide really, how we are aware that overseas and, well, international and even some European students can experience loneliness, disorientation, and general psychological problems associated with being away from home. We respond to that by having a very good international student officer who has programs, and there's more and more being done, in fact, to meet those needs and make them feel welcome from the word go. Now, the government responses, as we know, the government has reduced funding to HE institutions, which has had the effect of students having to pay more. Now, what a lot of students don't realise is this, we have to put our, I'm sure you've covered this, we have to put our fees up to bridge that gap between the original funding and what we need to run the institution. But of course, students now feel because they're paying more money, they have a right to demand more services. So that, again, is producing a unique set of problems for us as an institution. We've had a cut in the staff to student ratio, and academic staff are under constant pressure, really, to not only contribute to their research, but also, as Stuart was implying, assist those students on a one-to-one basis. Now, we have experienced quite a social and psychological change in the type of student. Things I've mentioned, like widening participation and an awareness of disability, are some of them. We've also got problems in the immigration visa system and lots of pressures such as that have contributed. The fact is also that there is much more psychological distress. Now, we have to kind of wonder why. My own view is that there is so much pressure on individuals to succeed that students are coming through already quite anxious. And you know, they are now coming here for 3 to 4 years, plus post-grad, to come out with something that is recognisably good. In my day at university, you just went there to study, but also have a lot of fun, because it was recognised it was a transition between leaving school and proper adulthood. Students nowadays can't necessarily have always that amount of fun. The fun they might experience can sometimes be to do with drink or drugs as a form of escapism. You know, they're working so hard and then they escape by drinking and taking drugs. So you can just see how the pressure is increasing. I think there are more recognisable mental health difficulties within our society too. So a lot of students are coming with pre-existing psychological problems, which is very sad in itself, that quite a lot of the students we see will have already been involved with mental health services, seen a psychiatrist, school psychological service, etc. So more needs to be done, really, to meet those needs. We are recognising that we have a group of more vulnerable students than maybe previously identified. When you consider that suicide is, certainly amongst young males, is very common between the 20 to 24-year-old group, you know, that's a concern, because actually young males don't always come through for help. We have far more females coming through for help. And it's the second to accidents in terms of young death, which is frightening. Now, sorry?
You're right with the hour.
Yes, I'm fine. I'm just kind of looking to see what I should then say. Last year, we saw 7.5% of the student population of nearly 23,000. I can assure you, if you come back this time next year, I'll be reporting a lot higher number. Already, since Christmas, just since Christmas, I've had 160 students come through to be assessed for help. 160. So we're just so overburdened.
These are British students?
These
or
are
internationals?
both. Students at King's. So as you can see, it's really quite concerning. And we have to, of course, to assess them as quickly as we can, because we really don't know what's there. They fill in quite a detailed form in terms of what they're experiencing at the moment. But sometimes they write anxiety, depression, but sometimes they write thinking of suicide, thinking of leaving university, etc., etc. So you have to get those in as quickly as you can. I dread Friday afternoons, because Friday afternoons you can guarantee about 4 o'clock, thinking of packing up, some really worrying students come through. And you're thinking, I can't be left with that worry over the weekend, but sometimes you have to be, but it is a problem. Right, now Anne Conlon, who's my predecessor, was involved a few years ago in producing the mental health policy for King's College. We were required with all other institutions to do so, and that is firmly now embedded on our website. So we have a duty of care to the King's College London community. We have to inform staff about various mental health problems. I'll talk about that again in a minute. What to do in an emergency, so that every tutor, departmental secretary and administrator knows what to do in the case of an emergency, or should do, and what to do if they disclose a disability. And we also have to think about reducing the risk in mental health problems. Interestingly, university counselling has been in existence in this country for now about 60 years. I think at King's it's been here for about 30, roughly. I'm not quite sure of the prehistory of that, but it's about 30. But certainly when I came, we were a very small team. I've been here a long time. And now we have the equivalent of about 9 full-time posts. So, but we do also have a psychiatrist as part of our team, which is quite unique amongst the British university system, to actually have a psychiatrist firmly embedded with us, so that's good. So the average ratio of students to counsellor in full-time education is 1 full-time equivalent to 3,500. I'm not quite sure of the latest figures for us. So what's our work all about? Well, I think already you've got some idea how we have to encourage students to come through to talk to us, and then we have to assess their need and decide on a treatment of choice. We are very lucky in as much as we've encouraged a multidisciplinary team, but all our psychologists stroke counsellors are highly trained. There are lots of kind of rather bogus qualifications out there. We will not even interview them. We really have a very, very high standard. So we're psychoanalytically trained psychotherapists, counselling psychologists. We have group analysts who've undergone a very rigorous training in group analytic theory. So they're able to run groups within the department. And we have, as I mentioned, a consultant psychiatrist who's also a psychoanalyst, which informs his theory. So apart from seeing students on a one-to-one basis, we do offer groups, and we're trying to offer more and more groups. There's the psychoanalytically informed groups I've mentioned, but we're also doing more psychoeducational groups. So we're looking at study, exam anxiety, generalized anxiety, procrastination, insomnia, loss, bereavement, and that can involve too perhaps the loss of the country of origin. So we wouldn't put those in with students who have been bereaved, but we will look very much at kind of what loss means in a kind of global way. Low self-esteem, obviously, because if they're not feeling very confident in their own abilities and in themselves, they're not going to perform well. So we want to maximise their ability to perform. And also how to cope with anxiety and depression. So all our psychologists have been on courses to help and understand anxiety and depression and meet the needs of the students. So if any of you have heard of a technique called mindfulness, we've now got groups on mindfulness to help students, say with, it's a form of meditation, but it's really to get them to sort of be more at one with themselves. We have a workshop for coping with university life, so that 2 of our therapists will actually run workshops for new students to look at the demands that they may have. And we also do a participation in professional practice in the medical school. So we're helping 4th-year medical students think about how best to meet the needs of their patients as they're embarking on a proper journey into hospitals. We have cross-cultural awareness programs, and we also are trying to use e-technology. We're introducing more techniques where students can access e-technology as a first port of call. We're also using CORE, which is a clinical outcome routine evaluation, so we can measure the success really of our treatment programs. We also offer training. Stuart alluded to the fact we actually help with tutors. We also help students within the senior students, as they're called, in halls, in residences, think about how best they can help students with any difficulties as they present. So we train them in listening skills, communication skills, and also make them aware of the kind of difficulties I've just been describing to you. Not so much to alarm them, but just to make them feel actually it is more, you know, what to do with these students if they're concerned about them. We have an excellent website which we're increasing all the time, so students can access reference books and, you know, other sources of help. Training for students is probably one of the most important things we do in terms of our training programme. As I mentioned, we've got our senior students, but what I'm now doing now, and I'm very excited by it, is the peer support training programme. As it says here, universities of Oxford, LSE over the road, Reading, Liverpool isn't down there, and ourselves now have this peer support training programme. It started at Oxford University about 20 years ago, and I actually went to have a look at this programme and spoke to the woman who introduced it to this country. And it's an exciting programme because it helps students be trained up in spotting and assisting students who have difficulties. Because we all recognise that students will probably pick up on other students' difficulties way before tutors and ourselves. So if they can pick up on those and be trained in what to do with them, then they can refer them to us. So again, what we're doing is making every student who comes through feel more cared for. Before I go on to talk about peer support again, we have a Nightline service which has been set up as a kind of Samaritans, if you've heard of Samaritans. It's a telephone listening service. Nightline is run by students, and it means that any student who's experiencing difficulty, particularly say they're feeling suicidal, can ring this service at night when they're probably feeling most vulnerable and other services aren't open, so they can ring another student anonymously and talk to them about how they're feeling. So that is set up right across the country now, but it did start in London. So, you know, we feel very privileged to have done that. In fact, Anne, who's my predecessor, was one of the people who really started that. Right, now the peer support training, we currently have 2 pilot schemes, and we're pushing the button on them at the beginning of February. So ready to go. We've got the School of Law, which we funded ourselves, so we've only managed to train up 7. But I did manage to get, thanks to the annual fund, which is a scheme which is supported by alumni, staff and friends of the college, we managed to get the funding to set up a training programme within the School of Medicine. And I've got 17 students, and I'm relieved and proud to say not one of them has dropped out. And they go from first year, but graduate first year, those who've already done a degree and are now doing a second degree, right up to 4th years. So there's a lovely group of students, very dedicated, and they will be operating from the Students' Association within the medical school. And they will now have a panel which will operate on a weekly basis for students to contact them if they've got any issues. And they've been trained on communication skills, listening skills, and know exactly how to refer. And we're just keeping our fingers crossed that it's a great success, because if it is and can become part of the institution within the School of Medicine, and hopefully Law too, then we can spread it college-wide, because as you can see, it will help enormously. Apart from ourselves, I'm sure you know about, we've got a disability service. Have they been told about all of this, or not? Not yet. Let me say it. Disability service, accommodation service, chaplains, careers, health centre, fitness, fitness and sport, and welfare and financial advice, as well as the international student advisors. So we link up and meet very regularly. And there's the compass that you've been told about. We have excellent liaison with our student health centre. It means that the doctors can tell us if they're concerned about any students, and we can soon refer to them too. There are strict limits of confidentiality which we have to adhere to, but we can still communicate with the student's permission. So we've got an increasing emphasis on students being consumers, as I mentioned. So as they come through and want the sort of help, we can respond to that. There's a constant pressure on us to improve our performance, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help students address the life-work balance. So when they come through, we don't just sit there and respond to their psychological problems, but help them to, in a practical way, just maybe looking after their diets, the fact that they're not exercising enough. All those things are really crucial to good study skills. There are lots of outcome measures, qualitative and quantitative, which I'm going to leave you to discuss and have a look at on the PowerPoint presentation, because I don't want to end on a boring note with lots of facts and figures. But do you think that's probably enough?